Anybody watching this remember the film Jingle All The Way? Is that with Tim Allen? You know, the one where Arnold Schwarzenegger body checks his way through a crowd of harried single mums, is an accessory to a bomb threat, and physically assaults like 4 retail workers, all for the chance to get his hands on that year's hottest toy. I do remember this. It's not with Tim Allen. Is it with Tim Allen and Arnold Schwarzenegger? I don't think so. Of course you do. That film is great. Don't remember it that well. Okay, so let's talk about the time all of that happened for real here in our world. Only instead of a turbo-tastic action figure with booster accessory, don't worry, there's plenty of boosters left, we're talking about a foot-tall, vibrating Elmo plush. This is the story of Tickle Me Elmo and how the cutesy red Muppet indirectly caused a whole heap of problems, including, as alluded to, a bomb threat, irate mob bosses, and even an Elmo-kidnapping. Firstly, for anyone unfamiliar with the Tickle Me Elmo toy, it's exactly what it sounds like, a small plush facsimile of the ever-popular Sesame Street character Elmo that you can, if you really want to, tickle. An action that will cause Elmo to vibrate at high speed and giggle, as what naturally does when tickled. As simple and evidently popular as this idea was, though, it didn't spring into the world fully formed, with the toy's inventor, Ron Dubrin, spending over a year refining the idea of a ticklish toy for toddlers into its now familiar Elmo form. According to Dubrin, a toy inventor by trade, he was inspired to create a toy that responded to being tickled after witnessing 2 children falling on their ass laughing while tickling one another in a park sometime in 1995. The sheer joy and simplicity of this moment got the gears in Dubrin's head turning, and he began to wonder if something like that could be replicated with a toy, presumably for kids without friends or siblings. With this idea firmly in mind, Dubrin approached a friend and fellow inventor called Greg Hyman about the logistics of creating such a toy, which, as it turns out, for Hyman at least, was literally child's play. We say this because Hyman had already cut his teeth in the blistering, fast-paced world of interactive plush toys, being the man behind a talking Barney the Dinosaur plush released a few years prior. An accolade we're fairly positive makes Hyman personally responsible for a couple of broken windows, as we can't imagine there isn't at least one parent out there who launched this thing out of a window for being annoying at some point in the 90s. In any event, with an idea in mind and the technical expertise to bring it to life, Hyman and Dubrin went into the workshop and slapped together the toy that was going to make their careers, Tickles the Chimp. Alright, so Tickles the Chimp didn't exactly set the toy world aflame, but the idea behind it was solid. As later recounted by Dubrin in a 2023 interview, Stan Clutton at Playtime Products, a company that would later be acquired by Tyco, who themselves would be bought by Mattel, was greatly enthusiastic about the toy's potential if they were able to attach the gimmick to a better-known character like Elmo. Again, according to Dubrin, it was actually Clutton who suggested ripping off Tickles the Chimp's skin and placing his vibrating robot skeleton inside of an Elmo doll. More accurately, according to Dubrin, Clutton's first words upon seeing a prototype Tickles in action were, "This is really good. It would make such a great Elmo." The only issue was that at the time, Playtime Products didn't actually have the correct rights to create such a toy. Specifically, at the time, Playtime Products had what are known as the plastic rights for the Sesame Street brand, which would allow them to make, as you've probably surmised here, plastic toys based on the show. The plush rights, well, they were owned by Hasbro. However, not all was lost, because Playtime did just so happen to own the plush rights to another brand popular with roughly the same demographic, Looney Tunes. This left Dubrin with a pretty big choice to make. Which member of the Looney Tunes would the idea of his toy best translate to? His answer? Taz, the Tasmanian Devil. Sadly, we're unaware of any Tickle Me Taz dolls making it out at the prototype stage, because while all of this was happening, Clutton was able to acquire the sole toy-making rights for the Sesame Street brand, reportedly by promising the brands that they'd make a Kit Butt plush featuring one of their characters and advertising the living crap out of it on television. That character was, of course, Elmo. With the rights in hand, Clutton told the engineers at Playtime working on Tickle Me Taz to toss their work and start working on an Elmo version instead. As an aside, because this is kind of funny, Looney Tunes were, as you'd imagine, all kinds of pissed to learn that they were like this close to having the hottest toy of 1996, and when the Elmo craze died down, had Dubrin work on a Looney Tunes knockoff of the idea. For some reason, the company opted not to go with the original idea of a ticklish Tasmanian devil, you know, the character known for his erratic movements and flipping out at a moment's notice, and instead told the team to make a Tickle Me Bugs Bunny and Tweety Bird instead. Neither of those sold well. Back to Elmo. While Clutton was certainly convinced a vibrating Elmo plush would do gangbusters, Sesame Street weren't all that enthused about the idea. In particular, the company didn't like the idea of an Elmo doll that could vibrate on its own because they were worried that parents and children would come to the natural conclusion that this meant Elmo was having a seizure. Which, to be honest, when researching this, is not where we thought their complaints were going to go when they were selling a vibrating doll to adolescents. Now, to remedy this, engineers altered the design so that Elmo would only vibrate when he was giggling, so kids knew for sure that Elmo wasn't going into anaphylactic shock or something. For anyone curious, Tycho, who by this point had acquired playtime, genuinely conducted research to see if anybody out there thought the doll was having a seizure when it vibrated without laughing. Exactly 0 people thought this was the case, but the change was made anyway to secure Sesame Street's okay. Another perhaps more sensitive change made to the toy during this revisionary period was to no longer have Elmo get sick of being tickled. You see, initially, after being tickled one too many times, Elmo would beg for the tickle torture to end and repeatedly scream, "Stop, stop, stop tickling me."
Oh boy!
As Mark Johnson Williams, one of the designers who worked on the toy, would later recount, there was something sinister about that. This all figured out, expectations for the toy were strong but conservative, with Tycho ordering about 400,000 units to ship to stores in July of 1996. Then, in the lead up to Christmas, which for toy manufacturers starts closer to October if not earlier, they ordered another 600,000. An amount it's likely all Tycho would have needed to order if not for one member of the marketing team, Ellie Bagley of Freeman PR, deciding to earmark a couple of hundred for Rosie O'Donnell. To explain, in the 1990s, talk shows were kind of a big deal because humans, and a popular thing talk shows would do to secure better ratings is, well, just give some shit away. Now, while Oprah is probably the most well-known example of talk show host doing this, with the Big O famously giving away several hundred cars on her show that one time, something we actually talked about in detail a few years ago, so check that out if you want to, but O'Donnell gave away her fair share of stuff too. Like with Oprah, those giveaways were highly popular and quickly became an absolute marketing boon for any company who could wrangle their way into O'Donnell's good graces. With the best way to do this, at least according to O'Donnell, being to promise a donation of some kind to charity. In her words, you could go, well, listen, I'd love to talk about your new product. If you were able to send 300 kids the new Elmo toy, we'd be able to do this for you. And that's how we did it. We bartered for charity. Of course, money also changed hands, the exact amount we can't say for sure, but suffice to say, O'Donnell wasn't plugging these things out of just the kindness of her heart. This said, according to Janice Yates, a former associate vice president of marketing and development at Tycho, you couldn't just send any old thing into the show. O'Donnell actually had to like the product for her to be willing to make it part of her giveaway. Fortunately for Tycho, O'Donnell did indeed like Tickle Me Elmo. In fact, Tycho had sent her one for free as a gift after Elmo appeared on the show, a gift O'Donnell's son promptly flushed down the toilet, something she of course shared on her show because it's humanizing. One person who wasn't laughing was the aforementioned Ellie Bagley, because she knew that they'd just been handed an absolutely golden opportunity to promote the toy for basically nothing when she saw O'Donnell recount that story. To this end, Bagley contacted Tycho and requested every Elmo we have, and as much red tissue paper as they could get their hands on. Bagley then saw to it that this veritable pile of Elmos was hand-delivered to the studio with a note from the brand wishing her son well. Within an hour, Bagley received a call from Rosie O'Donnell's show rep asking if the company could send along a couple more. When Bagley inquired as to how many exactly they needed, the rep asked for enough to give every single member of the audience one as a gift. It was at this moment Bagley knew they'd secured one of the most lucrative advertising spots on television for the manufacturing cost of like 200 Elmos. The exact amount isn't clear. Some sources say 200, but O'Donnell herself says 300, so it's hard to know for sure. What we do know is that O'Donnell did an admirable job as an impromptu spokesperson for Tickle Me Elmo. In fact, some would say that she did too good a job because during the episode in which she gave them all away, she really played up how much fun the toy was, which makes sense given that O'Donnell was a fan of Sesame Street and good friends with Elmo. The pair even collaborated on a Christmas song together, which, yes, is as absolutely as bad as you can imagine. In any event, it's really hard to overstate just how important O'Donnell was to the success of this toy, with a lot of sources we consulted crediting her as being almost single-handedly responsible for the ensuing Christmas bonanza, which is sort of true, but not the whole story. For example, according to Bruce McGuire, the CEO of Freeman PR, another individual who deserves some credit for popularizing the toy, is Today Show host Brian Gumbel, who, according to a segment talking about the toy that aired before the O'Donnell show, plugged it, sat with the toy on his lap for the entire segment as it occasionally vibrated in excitement. To quote McGuire, he was not the type you'd expect to have Elmo on his lap. It seemed to humanize him. Still, O'Donnell inarguably resulted in the bigger push, to the point that the predicted sales forecast for October in the wake of the segment went from 100,000 to 1 million. If you recall, this was literally twice as many, and then some, that Tyco had ordered for the entire rest of the year. Now, you're probably thinking, well, couldn't Tyco just order some more? Well, not really, due to a rather ironic twist of fate. You see, the very thing that made the plush so desirable, its ability to vibrate on command whilst giggling, required a motor that itself required a highly specialized process to piece together. In fact, the complexity of this motor almost saw the toy shelved during the prototype phase due to the proposed increase in cost, vibrated and giggled when squeezed, and another that just giggled before being asked which one they'd buy for their kids, with researchers making sure to note the version that vibrated would cost $10 more. The overwhelming response was that they'd picked the more expensive vibrating version.
Shut up and take my money!
In any case, the complexity of this motor meant that Tyco quite literally couldn't keep up with the demand, as any attempt to make the process go faster would result in the machinery and tools used to make the motor just burning out. In an attempt to remedy this issue, Tyco had to resort to ordering new tools, and then ultimately the tools needed to repair those tools. Even then, there was no way Tyco could get enough of these things to satisfy demand, so they just decided to ship out what they could and tell Freeman PR to cancel any and all further advertising that they'd planned. Something that gives this toy the rare distinction of being a product so successful that they had to stop advertising it. We know of at least one other thing that's actually covered in the bonus section today. So hopefully this sets the scene for the things mentioned in the intro, because we know you're here to hear about people getting kicked out of them over Elmo, so let's get into that. Alright, so pretty much right away, every single toy store in the States ran out of Elmos by the end of November, which saw parents desperate to get their hands on one, fighting, literally in some cases, over an ever-dwindling and eventually non-existent supply of Elmo dolls. For example, 2 women in Chicago were arrested after throwing down to get their hands on the last one. This is by no means an isolated incident, though most injuries were sadly suffered by overworked and no doubt sorely underpaid store workers. The most noteworthy of these being Robert Waller, a Walmart employee in Fredericton, Canada, who was knocked out cold by a crush of approximately 300 parents fighting over a morning delivery of about 48 Elmos. That said, in the time before widespread internet shopping, that was just a common Black Friday event, with pretty much every year countless news stories of people being trampled, sometimes to death, when stores would first open their doors on the morning of Black Friday. The 90s, everybody. But in any event, according to Waller, the last thing he remembers before his butt was knocked all the way over was a parent screaming, "There's the Elmos!" In the ensuing stampede, Waller suffered a broken rib, a pulled hamstring, and was knocked unconscious by, in his words, a white Adidas shoe kicking him clean across the face, the last thing he saw before he ultimately woke up in hospital several hours later. For reasons that aren't entirely clear, Waller's jeans had also been partially removed to the point that the crotch had been torn out of them. We could only assume this was probably the result of one of the members of the crowd trying to see if he had an Elmo tucked away in there or something. A similar story occurred at a Toys R Us in the United States, with a manager there recalling how an entire pallet of Elmos was torn apart by a crowd of parents before he could even wheel it to the correct shelf. According to a report from the New York Times, the experience of seeing a crowd of people tear apart the boxes of Elmos, which we should clarify would giggle when jostled to advertise that feature, was reportedly so harrowing that the unnamed employee, very understandably we feel, burst into tears, no doubt weeping for what humanity had become. And speaking of Toys R Us, they eventually had to resort to handing out Elmos more prepared parents had pre-ordered prior to the rush in unmarked boxes, apparently so that those parents wouldn't get the crap kicked out of them when they came to pick them up. In fact, employees around this time were specifically instructed to not refer to the toy by name when doing this, in the event someone hanging around heard that there was an Elmo available, and they responded to being told no in a way that would endanger staff. And no, we are not joking.
Available at South Park Mall starting Black Friday.
As alluded to at the start of this piece, multiple people called in bomb threats to Tyco's head office during the rush, and some parents went as far as to stalk or threaten employees. which is awful, so we'll share a slightly less, emphasize on slightly here, terrifying story recounted by the former vice president of Tyco's marketing department, Janice Yates. Quote, "I was riding the train home from New York one night and Stan asked me to go to do a radio interview. I get on the phone and did the interview. I look up and everyone on the train is looking at me. You work for that place? Can you get me an Elmo? I really felt like my life was in danger." End quote. Here's the thing though, as it turns out, Tyco did have a bunch of spare Elmos sitting around in their offices, and there were a handful of execs with the authority to dole them out to whoever they felt deserving. As many would find out though, this Elmo axis was something of a Faustian bargain, with execs soon finding themselves having to tell charities that they didn't have any Elmos left after agreeing to send some to celebrities who themselves promised trinkets in return. For example, Tyco agreed to send Harvey Weinstein, yes, that Harvey Weinstein, an Elmo in return for some VHS tapes. We feel that Elmo would not approve. Also, speaking of such people, another individual who managed to get their hands on an Elmo was John Gotti Jr., the son of John Gotti. Yes, the mobster John Gotti. In fact, Gotti Jr. got several of them after strolling into a Toys R Us 10 minutes before closing with a bunch of friends and filling 10 whole shopping carts with stuff, including an unopened box of Elmos staff just happened to find when he arrived. When asked for comment, a Toys R Us spokesperson strongly denied that Gotti Jr. got any special treatment, with the manager commending him for being in the right place at the right time to find that year's hottest and most sought-after toy. At this point, we should probably note that John Gotti Jr. paid approximately $8,000 in total in cash and handed every staff member a crisp $50 bill before leaving. When the story broke, friends of Gotti Jr. were quick to criticize the press for daring to insinuate that he had any untoward intentions, claiming that all of the toys were for local charitable organizations. A claim Gotti Jr.'s own lawyer eventually dismissed, telling the Associated Press he'd bought the toys for himself. And if we're honest, Gotti got a good deal here, because while the toy was listed for about $30 when it was on store shelves, on the secondary market, they were going for hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars. Something that ultimately resulted in one man taking a stand and putting Elmo on trial for his crimes. That man was DJ Hal 9000 Abrams, who was so incensed by the furor surrounding the toy and the fact that people scalping them for thousands of dollars was antithetical to the spirit of Christmas, that he got his hands on one and then, on air, threatened to feed it into a wood chipper. Eventually, after a massive calling campaign to save Elmo, he relented and gave the doll to a guy dressed as Santa, who subsequently gave it to a child in a nearby hospital. Actually, we should clarify that two men took a stand, because while DJ Hal ultimately spared Elmo, another DJ for 101 WRIF in Detroit was not so kind and ultimately opted to strap Elmo to a log and slowly push him into a wood chipper. Again, live on air. In this case, there was no clemency for Elmo, and the toy and the log, we guess, were shredded to pieces. Pieces that were then scooped up, placed in makeshift coffins, and handed out to onlookers so that everyone could have an Elmo. Footage of this exists if you want to give it a Google. Now, we don't know about you guys, but there's something not quite right about this whole Christmas ordeal and people getting so worked up that they strapped a benevolent, lovable thing who only ever preached the benefits of love and tolerance to the masses to a piece of wood and cheered as it was killed. Humans. And now for a bonus fact. Another ad campaign that was ultimately too successful was the so-called laundrette commercial. Created to advertise Levi's jeans, the commercials featured British singer and model Nick Carmen walking into an American-style laundromat and removing his jeans to wash them. The ad resulted in such a massive spike for that particular style of jeans. The ad was made to sell slimmer-fitting jeans after an internal survey found out that young people thought Levi's was an old-person brand, that it had to be taken off the air. The ad was so successful that jean sales of every style and brand increased nationwide in the UK, as did the sales of the type of underwear Carmen was wearing. Thank you for watching.